Good evening. I'd like to call the Tuesday, August 8th regular board meeting to order, please. Mr. Guidestow, would you call the roll?
Mr. Sauter. Here. Mrs. McKenna,
Here.
Dr. Santiani,
Present.
Mrs. Drees,
Here,
and Mrs. Trent.
Here, thank you. Next we would go to the approval of the agenda. Andy, are there any changes?
The one item that is, we want to pull off the minutes. We're approving the minutes on page 2 here. We want to pull the minutes of June 13th. We'll pull those minutes and we'll bring them back to you in September as we have some modifications we're going to look at. And then the other item, just so you're aware of, is we have pulled out from the consent agenda, the memorandum, get the proper terminology. The memorandum of understanding for creating a collaborative partnership with the city. That is going to be separate on item 12 now versus part of the consent agenda.
Thank you. So I would seek a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
make a motion to approve as amended.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded to approve the agenda as amended. Mr. Guidestow, would you call the roll?
I have
please?
a discussion item. So thank you. I also wanted to pull 9F and 10D, 9F policy technical changes and 10D transportation routes from the consent agenda, please.
You want to put outside the consent agenda?
Yes, please.
Tell me which ones again?
9F policy technical changes and 10D transportation routes.
I think it's 9E.
I'll have a nine.
Oh, sorry, that's because 9F became 12. So yeah, 9E,
9E and
Yes.
what's the other one?
10D transportation routes.
Okay. We'll put those as items at the end of the agenda. 9E and 10F,
9E and 10D.
or 10D. 10D. 9E and 10D.
Right? Is it 10D or is it a different?
No, it's 10D is in it's the transportation routes.
Any other discussion? Mr. Guidestow, would you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Drees,
Aye.
Mr. Sauter,
Aye.
Mrs. McKenna,
Aye.
Dr. Santiani.
Aye.
And Mrs. Trent.
Aye, motion carried. Thank you. Now I would seek a motion to go into executive session, please.
I make a motion to go into executive session in accordance to ORC 121.22 G1 to consider the employment and or compensation of a public employee or official.
Second.
So the motion has been moved and seconded to go into executive session in accordance with ORC 121.22 G1. Mr. Guidestow, would you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Drees,
Aye.
Mr. Sauter,
Aye.
Mrs. McKenna,
Aye.
Dr. Santiani.
Aye.
And Mrs. Trent.
Aye, motion carried. So we'll be back in a bit.
Great.
Thank you. And we're back from our executive session. So if we could go ahead and please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, so I would seek a motion for the approval of the June 6th and the June 27th minutes. Earlier, we pulled the June 13th meetings for further edits. So I'd seek a motion, please.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from June 6th and June 27th.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded to accept June 6th and June 27 minutes. Is there any discussion? Mr. Geisfeld, would you call the roll, please?
Mrs. McKenna,
Aye.
Mrs. Dries,
Aye.
Dr. Santiani.
Aye.
Mr. Sauter
Aye.
and Mrs. Trent.
Aye, motion carried. Thank you. And so we will now go to communications to the board and our superintendent's update. Welcome, Bob.
We're good. Good evening. It's an exciting day for me, so thank you for all being here on this beautiful summer evening. I'm sure there's nowhere else you'd rather be tonight. Look forward to the meeting tonight and sharing some of the updates from the district as well. So tonight we're going to go through a few district highlights and updates, just some things that have happened very recently in the district that I'd like to bring to the attention of the Board of Education and the community. I'm going to talk briefly about the Listen, Learn, and Lead update report, just for the board's knowledge and certainly our community. The most recent Listen, Learn, and Lead report is up on our district website for review, and we'll talk a little bit about what's in there tonight and how that will feed into some of the work moving forward for the year. I'll provide an operations update, an update from our Chief of Excellence and Engagement, as well as a update for human resources. So when we look at district highlights, obviously this is a very busy time of year as we ramp up to welcome back our students and our staff. And there's a lot of very exciting things that may be commonplace for you in Upper Arlington, but I think it's important to recognize this because it just doesn't happen anywhere. And the first opportunity I had was to introduce and welcome over 500 educators from around the state of Ohio to the Authentic Learning and Leadership Conference. And this is the second annual conference, and it's a partnership we've had in place in UA for a number of years. Last year at this time, about 150 people had participated in that conference. This year, over 500 educators showed up, and the feedback from all in attendance was just extremely positive. We had 53 teachers and staff members from Upper Arlington. I know a couple of our board members were able to attend, so certainly appreciate that support as well. And really, there is a decline in student engagement nationally. That's just how are we engaging students in the educational process. And this conference really focused on authentic opportunities and trying to provide more authentic learning and service opportunities for students in schools across our state. And I think this is a conversation we will continue to have here as we look at what do we need to provide for our young people. And it was just a great way to catapult into the year with a lot of enthusiasm. Also had the opportunity to welcome back over 50 new staff members, both administratively and from the teaching staff. I want to recognize our Chief Talent Officer and Matt's department. There's a tremendous amount of time that goes into making good hiring decisions. And too often we show up for a meeting or look at a process or see a recommendation on an agenda, and we don't realize about all the time that went into that. I would have loved to spend more time building relationships and talking to folks, but I spent a lot of times in transition, just interviewing and ramping up for this school year. But in the end, I think we have a very highly qualified staff that is willing to help continue the excellence that has been established in Upper Arlington. Also want to recognize these processes don't just involve, HR or the superintendent. They involve committees of folks. So we've got parents and teachers that step forward, students that step forward to serve on these committees. And I think it just reflects the commitment that this district has to the engagement and involvement of all of the stakeholders. So wanted to recognize that this evening as well. Also want to recognize Aaron Miguel and a new program that rolled out and started today, right? So day one of 3 days, we are rolling out the Start Strong program. And this is really just an opportunity for our internal experts to provide professional development for not only our new staff, but any staff member that's interested. So in rolling out this idea and organizing it, tremendous amount of time. I think there's 46 sessions available for our staff, and over 140 of our staff members step forward to participate. And I think it says a lot about not only the commitment of staff to come in that last, the last moments of the summer, but also the expertise that exists here to be able to put on that type of professional development opportunity. I'm sure there's compensation and resource allocation conversations that happened with the board. So I just want to thank you for supporting that initiative. And I think, and I hope this is something that will only continue to grow as we move forward. Also had the opportunity on August 1st to welcome back our administrative team. And I guess I would put quotes around retreat. We did go out of district in that we went over to the Graf Center. And we spent a day there, and we really focused on a couple of things. I think first and foremost is as a new leadership comes in, there's a level of uncertainty of change. And I wanted to really reinforce with our staff and our administrative team that the pillars and the values that we have will still drive this organization. Those are what have been created by our staff and our community. This idea of starting with heart, strengthen team, contagious drive. The vision and the direction of the district in the strategic plan, the 3 major pillars, will continue to drive the work as we move forward. We will certainly engage in a conversation about what's next as we go through, but I just want to reinforce that it's important that there's great things happening, and those will continue as we move into the year. So I think as we talk board as about goals and direction for the year, hopefully you will see that work is playing through. We also talked a lot about culture and culture shaping and our responsibility as leaders to shape culture within the organization, and our responsibility to this broader community to demonstrate how important education is. And then we ended with a little conversation about goal setting within departments and buildings, and that'll be more information that will be to come. And there's a lot of unique things about Upper Arlington. And when this came up on my calendar, I scratched my head a little bit, but for the second year in a row, UAEA and the administrative team spent a half a day talking about how we want to operate and work together, evaluating norms and how we want to communicate. And it was a very productive day to not only build relationships, but really talk about what that relationship is going to look like as we move forward. As you know, our staff very well respected, very knowledgeable, and they're an important part of every conversation we have about our school improvement initiatives. And I think this just laid a nice foundation for that work. I've had this little thing called transition going on, and tonight I think we can finally end the transition from coming from Barrington, Illinois to Columbus, Ohio. I wanted to take a minute and just thank the Board of Education, the staff, many people in here, the community members. The amount of support I have received personally and professionally has just been overwhelming. I was finally able to get a house, and that was a whole story in and of itself. But you would not, there's a lot of realtors in UA, but there's a lot of wannabe realtors too that were constantly sending me information. And I'm just happy to be a part of a community that cares that much about the transition. I also want to, I guess, speak on behalf of all of our new administrators. The quality of the team and that kind of extension and support has reached every new administrator that has come to the district. And hopefully our new teachers that we hired felt that support as well. So wanted to take a moment to thank you on that. As I mentioned, a lot of the transition was spent on hiring and looking at building our team and capacity moving forward. Also, taking some time to study current operations, current responsibilities, and making recommendations to the board on the organizational structure, which we'll talk a little bit about tonight. But in addition to that, we've continued with the initiative with Listen, Learn, and Lead, and had an opportunity to really engage in conversation. And I think even in the conversations I'm having currently beyond Listen, Learn, and Lead, the one thing that resonates and keeps coming out is that this school district is really at the heart of this community. And what we do here is critically important, not only to the education of students, but this sense of community and a place that the gathering happens. And that really resonated throughout this as I've kind of gone through that. I will continue to proceed with meetings. I've met with all the village council members and different organizational leaders to continue to understand what makes our community special. But it's obvious that the school district being at the heart of that is a critical component to the success of Upper Arlington. So in terms of Listen, Learn, and Lead, there's a large document that I'm not going to spend the time reading to you tonight. I appreciate the organization of that. I know that's an extension of something that started in 2022. I also thank you for your participation. Every board member was at multiple sessions as we kind of engaged in conversation with our community about our schools. The report is built, kind of around the themes and the structures that are on the screen. And I won't read to you, but I think it's really important that we understand that these sessions were really based off of what you heard from the community in terms of what they hoped for in the next superintendent. And then these conversations in these meetings talk to our community and our stakeholders about if you wanted those things, what would it look like? What would the superintendent be doing? And that theme, it resonated throughout the session. So we conducted 7 sessions, a little bit of a marathon, couple of days, I'll be honest with you. But when you look at engagement and involvement, I think it speaks to Upper Arlington. We had 578 participants. 359 of those were students. So there was activity within buildings as well, having similar conversations. Some of the celebrations, and I think I'll probably tell you things you already know, but things that came out of that are really, really important here and valued by our community are the idea of our extensive offerings and paths that we have for students so they can pursue whatever passions that they have. The quality of staff, the facilities that you have all worked so hard for to build over the last couple of years kept coming up. This idea of accepting cultures and their ability to thrive within their personal pathways came up as well. And then the support and engagement of parents and community as well. For me, it was very obvious that there was a true interest and a focus on relationship building, not glad handing along the way, but taking the time to build relationships in every aspect of our organization and in our community. And to do that, the themes of being active listener, being present and visible, and then this idea of creating opportunities, both formal with agendas and maybe topics to have conversation, but also informal opportunities where the community or the staff or the students can just sit down. I can't tell you the number of times I heard, if you just walk down and sit down and have lunch with one of the students, you could gain so much about Upper Arlington. So when we look at goals and where my focus will be, I think, board, you'll see a lot of that play through what I bring to you here in September. And then we also asked, okay, what areas do we need to improve on? What do we need to work on? And some of the themes there were this idea of furthering the STEM opportunities that we have for our students and an idea of innovation. We've been known for continuous improvement and innovation, and we want to continue that work and maybe expand upon it. Consistency among elementaries and middle school as we build towards that high school, and as well as culture of acceptance around diversity, equity, inclusion came up as a theme as well. So again, appreciate the involvement. I appreciate the engagement. The report looks great if you go online, but it's meaningless if it doesn't come into action, which is my responsibility to do as we work with the team moving forward. So that's an update. I suggest you take a look at that. certainly encourage our community as well. I did want to, I know the board has received a variety of updates along the way regarding our organizational structure. So I wanted to take a time tonight to just walk through that with the board and also provide that information to the community. As we've had a significant number of turnovers and some change in how we structure things. I think first of all, I'll start with what Andy Geisfeld would care most about is this is an FTE neutral organizational chart. So we didn't add staff to make this happen. But we did restructure responsibilities and we're in the process still of communicating that out to staff. We spent some time at both the UAEA meeting and our administrative retreat, walking through this, answering questions, asking what's not clear, because I think there's just an interest in understanding who will be responsible for what. I think it's important with any organizational chart specific to schools and public schools is you start with who's at top. And we serve and we work for the citizens of Upper Arlington. And we have their most precious commodity comes to us every single day is their children. And it's our responsibility to get to know that individual student where they're at and help improve and get them to where they want to be and grow. You as elected officials represent that community, and that's a tremendous responsibility as well. So you all have constituents who you represent on this board, and your role is often about kind of what are the priorities? What are the focus areas as we move forward? And then you turn it over to the administration and say, okay, how do you make that happen? Go make that happen and go do. And that's the work that we have. So in the organizational structure, obviously, my role as superintendent, I get to work with just a lot of very talented individuals on the education side of the house, the operations side, and I work very closely with our CFO, who also reports directly up to the Board of Education. Little different nuance when I went to Illinois that the CFO reported to the superintendent, and here in Ohio, it reports directly to the Board of Education. But there's a checks and balances responsibility to that, and that's the logic behind it. So I've really enjoyed already working with Andy and his team. Underneath the superintendent, not changes, but we've got Karen Truitt as the Chief Communication Officer, Deputy Superintendent, which I'll talk about here in a minute, who is Dr. Stephanie Siddons, and the Chief Operating Officer, Greg Thompson. So Greg has taken over for Chris Potts and has just hit the ground running. And I will tell you, he picked up the 4th of July emergency phone call about baseball fields or whatever it was. So he was there to help make it happen. So pass that first test. One of the most significant changes is the district had in place 2 associate superintendents. As we've gone through this transition, we've consolidated that into one position of deputy superintendent. So when we look at that role and that responsibility, really the student services and the academic side of the house fall under Dr. Siddons and Dr. Siddons' responsibility. So if you move kind of from left to right on this chart, I asked that we change the title and some of the responsibility for what was typically an HR role and move that title to Chief Talent Officer. And honestly, this is just a kind of a personal belief that HR has always been known as that dark place that you go when there's problems, right? And certainly there's functions in HR that kind of fit in under that description. But I want the mindset to be about talent acquisition, going and finding the best, and talent retention, and creating systems within our organization that make people want to stay here long-term and be successful. So in working and placing Matt in that position, he's working really hard on that transition and doing some great things that we've already talked about in terms of Start Strong and the new teacher orientation. The next position I'm going to skip over and come back to it. Chief Academic Officer is Keith Pomeroy. Keith has been in place. Obviously, a lot of the teaching and learning, the curriculum, the assessment, all of those functions fall under his responsibility. Well, one of the changes I will point out here is we did move the elementary directors of education into a building because there was I believe a late resignation, and she operated in a building last year. So we were able to pull her out, and we have both an elementary director of education and a secondary education. So that really allows those folks to lean in and be closer to what's happening in the buildings. All of our building principals report up to those directors and work hand in hand. The hope is, some of the things that will come out of this, we want improved consistency in what we do. We want every building to have their own personality, their culture. That's really, really important, but there needs to be some continuity in what we do as well. And a lot of what these individuals will be there for is to support principals in making that happen. So that is a change. The last change I would point out to you is not an addition, just a movement change, is we've moved the BEX program under the Director of Elementary Education. So really approaching that as this is a principal who operates in elementary and want them to be a part of every one of those conversations. So Chief of Student Services, People Services, that hasn't really changed a whole lot. And the last change is the title of Chief Excellence and Engagement Officer. So used to have a CTO, Chief Technology Officer. Denise Lutz has served in that capacity for I won't say how long, but for some time, and really led this district in terms of innovation and moving to one-to-one. And that department is operating very, very well. We brought in a Director of Operational Technology underneath Denise, and this position is a familiar face. It's an individual that we had been doing a lot of contracting out for our infrastructure, and we're able to pluck and bring him on staff, which kind of saved some of those dollars that were going out the door before, and we're very excited about that. The district has remained committed to the idea in the strategic plan about wellness and well-being. There was also work in the areas of diversity, equity, inclusion. And quite honestly, all of those aren't fragmented. They're one house and one umbrella. So Denise has, transitioned even this last spring as Paul had transitioned out and Kathy stepped up to help in the interim basis. She took on a lot of those well-being responsibilities and areas and filled in that gap. So this transition, although a new position, really brings all of that work together under one place. And really the focus of this is, what do students need to be successful? How do we keep them engaged in our organization? How do we create cultures that are inclusive and welcoming? And bringing this work together, I think is really important. And Denise will talk about next steps specifically to diversity and equity. But I also think it's critical to understand that this isn't one person's work. This is the entire organization's work. And as we think about professional development and rolling out and strategies to really focus on certain areas we're concerned about, there's going to be multiple people involved in this. And I'll just use the example of recruitment and retention of candidates. She can talk about that. Matt Jordan has to be involved in the do, right? So we're going to have a lot of conversations where she's cross-secting amongst our team. And again, she's going to provide an additional update later. So I think that covers the majority of organizational chart. I'm going to ask Mr. Jordan to come up and give the Board of Education an update on human resources. I think I've effectively taken everything he wanted to tell the board, so this is good. Perfect.
All right, quick human resources update. And yes, Dr. Hunt did cover virtually everything. That's perfect. So just a couple of highlights that you saw, and just real proud of our team with the new teacher orientation. Obviously, Aaron Miguel, we did a great job with all the new staff. We are, as of tomorrow, we'll be fully staffed from a certified perspective. So we're excited about that. The Start Strong, just want to touch on that. That is brand new this year, as Dr. Hunt had said. Very excited with our teachers, our experts who are obviously doing this and putting on for our whole staff. And hopefully we can see the growth next year, similar to what we saw with that program that was here over the summer, to go from 100 and whatever to 500. It'd be nice to see a larger group of our staff participate. So that's going on today, tomorrow, and Thursday, if you get a chance to pop around and see that. And it's all throughout the district, at all the buildings. Job descriptions you have in your possession tonight. Dr. Hunt referenced the positions, the Chief Excellence and Engagement Officer, Chief Student Services Officer, and the Chief Talent Officer. We have all those for your approval. And then with those go along the rescinding of the Associate Superintendent positions that were consolidated into the Deputy Superintendent. And also you have some board policies to take a look at, mainly the technical technical things, but looking at who the coordinators are under some of those policies, harassment, sexual harassment, those sort of items, who people go to talk to in regards to those. So that is it. Any questions?
All right, I'm going to welcome Denise up to the podium here and have her walk through at a pretty high level, some of the work that we are recommending that we complete this year in our partnership with the Insight Group, and certainly we can answer questions regarding that.
Hi, good evening. So tonight I wanted to share a little more details about our partnership with the Insight Education Group that we selected through an extensive RFP process this past year. It started with Dr. Kathy Jenny. That process included input from staff and students, the Board of Education, and lots of community members. This agreement that we're entering into is a one-year partnership that will take the district through a formal needs assessment process, or they're calling it an equity audit, in order to support the district and building stakeholder groups, develop a report of findings, and guide the development of an action plan that will support the district in strategic planning process. I think it's important before we begin this school year to take an inventory of where we are so we can identify what we need to work on and what we can certainly do better. So the needs assessment process, or the equity audit, focuses on identifying and remediating gaps in opportunity and access, as you can see from the diagram. We focus on those two areas because if there's deficits for any student or any part of the organization, then that greatly affects the outcomes or the potential outcomes that they could have. We're going to lean on the Insight Education Group and their extensive experience to help us examine the root causes of inequitable practices that can create barriers to a full educational experience. The audit will begin reporting on information that's triangulated through data submissions that we're providing them, through surveys that will take place this fall, and through specific focus groups. The assessment of the 3 data points will provide clear recommendations for a path forward to really ensure equitable education for all students. The assessment encompasses recommendations in the 5 areas of their framework, which it's a little blurry. So the 5 areas include curriculum, instruction, and learning, structures, systems, and resources, culture and community, professional learning and personal growth, and then equity in the educator workforce. So the results of the assessment, coupled with the strategies for addressing the results, are certainly going to address the recommendations that was presented to the board in June from the Equity Advisory Board. This slide points out a timeline of this fall and the work that's going to take place this fall and what we've already begun. In June through August, right now, we're going through some planning conversations, setting some dates, and we're completing and submitting the requested data and policies that they have asked us for. September, October timeframe, we're going to work on finalizing the survey development and identifying stakeholder focus groups. October and November, we're going to deploy those surveys to the community, to students, to staff members, and we're going to also complete the focus groups. December, we're anticipating to receive a first draft copy of their report after they're done with their data calculations and triangulation. We'll be able to look at that over the winter break. And then in January, we're expecting a final report and then kicking off the action planning on what we're going to do with the findings of that report. While all this audit is taking place, simultaneously, our consultant from Insight is going to be meeting with building DEI teams. We're going to be making visits with building principals, interacting with students, looking at the flow of the buildings, meeting with cabinet members and other department leaders. So that's what I have to share. Are there any questions?
So I did have a question about some of the data that we've been submitting to them. Are you able to talk about the categories of data that they've asked for? If there are other areas that you think we need to make sure we're including, that kind of stuff?
Yeah, there's a list. There's like a page and a half list of things that we have started submitting to them. And includes everything from student handbooks, employee handbooks, sample curriculum, board meeting agendas, our strategic plan, recruitment strategies. We look at our policies, professional learning schedules from the district, samples of curriculum. I think I said that already, our coaching plans. We submit all kind of student achievement data, growth data. We did provide them with panorama data, the student course catalog, the student rights and responsibilities handbooks. We look at attendance, we look at discipline data, college enrollment, graduation rates, attendance, and a lot of subcategories under each one of those main headings.
So in each of those categories, they have enough information to be able to deaggregate that by gender or by.
We did each of those categories, like achievement data was disaggregated by subgroup status from our state testing results. Yes.
Thank you.
Denise, you've mentioned that they'll be coming in and doing focus group and deployment of the surveys. I'm assuming that surveys will just be online. But
Yes.
the focus group, will they be physically present here? Are they doing Zoom focus?
Yeah.
Have you heard yet?
We will have both opportunities. We want to make sure that we're able to accommodate people in both formats, in person and Zoom if needed. They will be in person here, but we can accommodate Zoom meetings also.
Have they identified what the focus groups are?
Yeah, we're not that far in the process
Okay,
yet.
so that'll
but,
be coming.
They've talked about it. They have over 20+ years of experience in working with school
Mhm.
districts. So one of our soon to be conversations will be what kind of process do we go through to make sure that our focus groups are representative
Mhm.
of everybody in school and in the community.
Okay.
And we'll certainly lean on recommendations from the board, from our cabinet, from our administrators, and make sure that students, staff, and community are included.
Will you be giving us monthly updates then?
Yes.
That'd be great.
Yep.
Thank you, Denise. That looks great.
So Denise, I have a question about the laundry list. Was that something that they provided to us? Did we work in concert together? I guess what I'm thinking is, what are we missing? I mean, it sounds like a really long list, but
It's a really long list and there are a lot of people working on this list. Again, it's, we're working with our chief talent officer. We're working with Dr. Yaki, our data and assessment director. It's a big collaboration among all the departments. They did provide us with a list. We have a shared private drive and they just spelled it all out and we're, pulling the data and putting it into that shared drive for them.
So I know the Equity Advisory Board also had a list of data they were looking for. I'm assuming that's already been incorporated.
Yeah, we are making sure that recommendation of the 3 recommendations is fully addressed through this process. And I would like to schedule time with the EAB this fall. We haven't done that quite yet. When our consultant is in district so that she has an opportunity to meet with that group and learn about where they've been and the journey that they've gone through too. Okay, thanks.
So just a couple of points to echo. First of all, there's a lot of really good work going on in the district that has been started. That work will continue. And this is an opportunity for us to take a step back and really evaluate what are the areas we want to make progress in. The other thing that was mentioned, the EAB did make some recommendations. And we are utilizing those in our current plan, like in terms of goals and activities to make progress there. So I just wanted to be real clear that the work continues to move forward. I think at this point, I'd like to bring Greg up to give the board an update on summer projects. It's always fun. I use the word fun. A fun time of year as you walk around in the hallways and you think there's no way these buildings are ever going to be ready. And there's no way that all these major projects are going to get done. And I've been in this long enough to know just like go to sleep and wake up and somehow our custodial staff, our maintenance staff, they make everything happen and it looks beautiful on the other side. But I also just would point out to you, there's a commitment to investing in our facilities, which is often a place that has to be cut or cut short because we want to do different things for students. And yes, we have a lot of beautiful facilities, but it's important that we continue to invest in those facilities and maintain them appropriately. So we get the, appropriate life out of each one of those. So I know Greg and his team is working really hard, and tonight's an opportunity for him to brag a little bit about what's been accomplished and show our board and our community that work.
Good evening, board. So it's a pleasure to be here tonight. And I'm very fortunate coming to Upper Arlington. I have inherited an outstanding team that is surrounding me. So Dr. Hunt mentioned that as you walk through the buildings, we don't have all the projects done. We don't have all the work done. We still got a few days, and we have a team that is dedicated to get us there, and we will get there, I'm sure. Things happen very quickly as we get closer and closer. So tonight, I just want to talk about and highlight some of our larger projects. First off, I'll talk about some of the security enhancements we've been able to accomplish and actually are still in the process of accomplishing. We received grant money through the American Rescue Plan Act, which went to the state of Ohio and then to Upper Arlington schools through a grant application. So some of those enhancements are two-way radios, additional cameras and door controls, access into the buildings, cell signal boosters at certain buildings, and also security film on select doors and windows. So those are all additional layers to help our facilities be a little more secure. Kitchen equipment at Hastings and Jones both, we have purchased some equipment, and we have also repurposed some of the equipment that we have taken out of the buildings that we renovated. So it's been great to use things that we already have. When we do have that opportunity, we like to do that. And this work was also done in-house by our own staff. So those are great things. The Yes painting team, this is also work that's been done in-house. Zach Sprout, who was one of our teachers, and I guess years ago was actually on the Yes team painting himself. We're able to accomplish 105 jobs at all 9 school buildings across the 8-week summer period. We had 16 student helpers helping us with that work. Asphalt ceiling at Graff, Greensview, and Wickliffe. Hastings, the asphalt behind the building where the basketball and the play area is, that has been redone, and the hoops are going to be installed next week. So that's one we're up against the wire to get that done before the kids are there. That's going to be very close, but we will have that finished up shortly. Upper Arlington High School on Golden Bear Boulevard, the LED ticker. So there's a 50-foot ticker used for school messaging and current events that is going to be mounted on the wall there. This is a great project. It was delivered last week, and it should be installed, scheduled for installation Monday afternoon. So that'll make it just before the kids get in there. And that project was funded through multiple sources, including foundation and legacy donations. So that's a great thing. Tennis court resurfacing at Jones Middle School. This is one that we've had some weather delays with. It is still in progress. It is not going to make it before school starts. It has impacted the season somewhat already. Mindy Bean, our new middle school athletic director, has done an outstanding job coordinating where the kids can still do their tryouts, practice, do all of those things. But we expect that to be completed next Friday, the 18th. One of the large projects we did was Marv Moorhead Stadium, turf and pad replacement. So that is a project that actually got completed early. It looks outstanding. If you haven't had a chance to get out there to take a look at it in person, you should. This is our multi-use field. There's actually 5 sets of lines on the field, 5 different color of lines because there are so many different sports that use it. Football, soccer, both boys and girls, girls lacrosse, boys lacrosse, and field hockey are all on that field. So again, it looks outstanding. At Barrington, we had a section of roof, flat roof that needed replaced. It is on the unrenovated portion of the building. So you can see on the picture on the right there where the lift is at, it's up there where the guardrail's at, that flat area of roof. It's a flat section that's aged out. It's got lots of details, roof penetrations, tie-ins to other slate sections that were failing. So we needed to get that repaired, and we got that repaired this summer. At Tremont, we have done window replacement. The picture on the left shows on the bottom a before picture of what it looks like. And then the top, those have been replaced already. So it's a before and after. And then the picture on the right shows along the back of the building. It's really quite an extensive project. All of the windows need to come out of that opening. Everything gets cleared out, and then all the new pieces go in. So that is a project that is not yet complete. We are finishing that up. There's still most of the work on the inside is done. It will be done tomorrow. And then after that, there's still some finishing details on the outside of the building. So teachers and everyone can be in there and do what they need to do on the inside. This is the Upper Arlington High School Athletic Corridor mural. And this is also paid for with legacy money. It shows the athletic history from the beginning of Upper Arlington schools, so the original high school, which was Jones. And then they moved into the old high school. And it goes all the way from our history there with the bear at the beginning to 2020 when we moved into the new building. So that's really a great thing. If you can see that in person, that's a nice mural as well. So one last item I want to share with you while I've got the microphone is later in the agenda, there's going to be 2 items for your approval on the consent agenda. One is the bus routes, which are required annually for approval. And the second item, it will be a resolution declaring transportation impractical and payment in lieu, which is also done annually. So any questions for me?
I have one question that you may not be able to answer because it may have been before you started. But I know with the Marv turf replacement, there were a lot of environmental precautions that can be that were taken to make it a more environmentally friendly project. Do you know some of the details of that we can be shared?
I'm not sure of environmental concerns. My understanding is it was a green project. So we reused a lot of the pellets that were already there. And I believe nothing from that went to the landfill. I'm not 100%. I can check on that to make.
You are correct. That part of the process was to make sure that the turf that came up, the part that we didn't keep for other use, that got basically refurbished or used in other ways and did not go to the landfill. So we were very careful making sure it was a green project.
Thanks. I have one more question, which actually might be for Bob. The ticker that's going up that you mentioned,
Yes.
Will that be something that the Arlingtonian staff will be populating, or the administrators in the building, or Kicking It Live, or who's going to be deciding what goes on the ticker?
It's actually part of it. Go ahead, Denise. You want to go ahead and answer? Or you want me to?
Thank you.
I love the athletic corridor. It really looks awesome.
Yeah.
Have they thought about doing something along the corridor where the orchestra band, the theater department is? We got a pretty awesome history in the arts as well. And
That is something that has been discussed, and they are still working on that. As Chris was working, kept giving them opportunities, and they were still trying to figure out the best way they wanted to do that. So that really is in the hands of the orchestra and the band group. If you get on the other hallway, you'll see like the theater, for instance, the theater has a bunch of posters up from all their years, et cetera. So that'll happen sometime. When, it really depends on when that's determined by
Okay.
those liaisons.
Okay, thank you. I'll turn it back over to Dr. Hunt.
Thank you. Just one last slide. First of all, just a reminder to our board, we do have an upcoming retreat in September on the 25th and 26th. We will be at Hocking Hills. We've had some just initial conversation about various topics, could be legal updates, check in on board norms, collaboration, and communication with amongst the board, strategic planning, process timeline. So we're kind of hashing through that. I'll continue to work with both Nancy and Lori on that. Also want to add to that agenda. I had the opportunity to meet with a group of residents, non-residents that are involved in a lawsuit related to the voucher program in Ohio. And it probably leads to a larger conversation about advocacy and how we go about advocacy within our school district. So I'd like to have that conversation with the board on how we approach advocacy in public education to just really kind of begin that conversation and understand what direction we want to go. The last thing I will point out is one, again, I appreciate the support and transition, but two, this board stepped forward and dedicated two work sessions to come together with me as a new superintendent and talk about how we want to operate together as a group. And first of all, that's a time commitment, and you all have lives and you're volunteers, and that's very much appreciated. But second, it provides an opportunity to reflect on what's gone well and how we want to operate moving forward. And I know in a moment you're going to discuss norms and have that conversation about approvals of those. But I just want to commend you for that work. It demonstrates that this board is committed to working together efficiently, appropriately, in the right space to further our school district moving forward. And I often think of these, and I've done this before with other school districts, as there's a couple of reasons you go through this activity. One of them is legacy, because we're all kind of, I would say we temporarily hold our seat no matter what our position is, and for how long, I don't know. But from a legacy perspective, to have these type of things in place as people transition through, it's really important that we kind of commit to the values that we have as a school district and a community and as a board, and how we're going to operate. And then the other is kind of guardrails as and aspirations on how we want to operate and should operate, because we're all passionate and we care and we want to do the right thing. And I've had the opportunity to meet with all of you together quite a bit and individually, and there's no question that each and every one of you care about our students, care about the student experience, and want the best for our community. And I think as we kind of work through this together, these will serve as reminders of how we best can do that. So again, I didn't want to jump on your agenda item, but I just wanted to make those comments and thank you for your dedication and service as I transition in the district. So if there's no questions, that would conclude my report.
Thank you, Bob. This is a great transition, by the way, for us to move to our board action item. We just have one item this evening, and it relates to the approval of board norms. So in order to start the discussion, I would seek a motion to approve the board norms as submitted.
I make a motion to approve the board norms as submitted.
I
Thank you,
second.
Nancy. Thank you, Lou. A motion to adopt the board norms as presented has been moved and seconded, and so we will now have discussion. I would like to reiterate the comments that Bob shared and thank the entire board for their dedication to this process. We have all contributed many hours, attended two separate special meetings on May 2nd and June 6th to discuss board roles, responsibilities, and protocols. All board members were in attendance at both meetings. We also enlisted the help of our legal counsel, as well as a consultant to guide us through this process. The process included several drafts of the board norms with input from each board member. A significant amount of time was dedicated to the discussion and the development of the board norms that are presented for your consideration. Both meetings were open to the public and were at least 4 hours in duration. Today, as we take action on the norms, we want to celebrate consensus and recognize the effort that not only each board member has contributed to, but also our administrative staff. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, I'd like to make a couple of comments. As Lori said, we've already discussed a lot of this. As a member of the public, when you look at our norms, I think there are a couple areas that can be interpreted in a couple of different ways. I just wanted to make sure that our intent behind these was clarified. So the first one is under number 2, which is our agenda development process. And we actually got an email today from a community member asking us about, when the agenda is shared with the public and can it be shared earlier and all of those things. So just wanted to reiterate that we, as it stands now, we will be receiving the agenda 3 business days prior to the meetings, and the public will be receiving it 48 hours before the meetings. Both of those are increases in how we've done them over the past. I think all of us would like to see it happen with an even longer time period, but those were the numbers that we came to in our meeting. So I just want to clarify that. But I did also want to mention that, yeah, I wanted to clarify that. I know there were questions around that. The 3 days and the 48 hours is longer than it was before. The second piece I wanted to clarify is under number 3, which is questions about meeting agendas. I've gotten some questions because one of the things we have here is that as board members, we will ask all of our questions prior to the meeting and then ask them again in a public session. And I just wanted to clarify that this is the intent behind this is not to make our meetings like a performance or a performative type meeting. It is so that people can bring the information needed to be prepared for our meetings. And so in doing that, it allows us to have answers to our questions. But I also wanted to clarify that we all agree that this does not mean we cannot ask other questions in our meetings. And so as we have conversation, as we have discussions, naturally questions will come up. And we have agreed that that is acceptable to ask those questions. Another piece on our norms that I think is that could use some clarification is number 5, which is about requests for information. And this is a piece that I think is really important for us as a board. We agreed that we want to protect the time of our administrators, make sure that they are able to focus on our students and keep that as the number 1 priority. And so we have agreed that any kind of request for information that would require more than 30 minutes of time would go to the full board for consensus. And that includes things like if we as board members are having a meeting with a community member and we would like the superintendent to attend that meeting for us, that if that meeting were to be more than 30 minutes, that would be something that the whole board would agree to. Again, in order to make sure that our administrators are really able to focus on supporting our students. So those are the clarifications I wanted to make. There was one thing that we had agreed upon at our initial norms conversation that did not make it into our final copy. So I'd like to just get fellow board members' thoughts on that. And that is under number 1, the code of ethics. We talk about how the board will emphasize planning, policy making. And what we had agreed upon in our initial meeting back in May was that we would also have policy evaluation as a part of our emphasis. It didn't make it into this copy, so I wanted to put that idea out there to see if people have changed their minds on that topic or if we have other ideas about policy evaluation being a part of the board's emphasis. It's 1D. So in our meeting in May, we had said that the board, the way it's currently worded, says the board will emphasize planning and policy making. And in May, we said the board will emphasize planning, policy making, and policy evaluation. but that and policy evaluation piece is not in the current draft.
Excuse me, I thought in our second meeting, we discussed that prior to COVID, policy was handled by HR. Isn't that correct? And that we would handle policy in the HR meeting. Isn't that what we talked about?
Yeah.
That's what we talked.
Yeah.
Yeah, in June. That the HR committee would handle policy.
I'm comfortable with the way it's worded
I
right
am
now.
too.
So, knowing that we have HR looking at policy, we have a separate company also looking at it, and that it's brought to the board with recommendations after discussion in the HR committee. I feel that what we have here is policy making is sufficient.
So going back to the point that you made, Lou, about the policy shifting from a board policy, from a board committee to the HR superintendent committee. I agree that is something we discussed in our June meeting, but we never actually took a vote on it. And so I don't think that change has actually happened yet.
I don't think we take votes at that because
Work session.
it's a work session.
At
So,
special meetings,
yeah.
right? And so,
So I
and
felt-
so this change, and so that's actually part of, I guess, what we'll get to when we get to 9E later. But we are allowed to take votes in special meetings. We just can't take votes during executive session.
I think we had agreed, the way I interpreted our meeting, we had agreed that we would move the policy to HR,
Mhm,
the way they had done this for years before.
mhm.
I was under the impression that a majority of us were in approval of that. So as well as Nancy, am comfortable with the wording of this and would like to move on to approve this,
Mhm.
since we've already handled this already. Can we get?
Sure.
Yeah.
I just wanted to mention one thing on 5A. I don't think that 30 minutes relates to meetings. It was about the amount of time that the administration was going to use to research a particular item that a board member was concerned about or wanted explored. So I don't think it relates to meetings.
I'm sorry, I couldn't open the board document, so I have a different, I think an older version. Can you just tell me what I have in here is the board will emphasize planning, policy making and communications rather than becoming, and you want it to, your proposed change. I just was not, I was like looking for it and did not hear you.
Yeah, and then where it says policy making, it's policy making and evaluation.
Okay.
Yeah, it says evaluation of the superintendent, which obviously is our legal mandate. I'm saying policy evaluation. So if there aren't any
Um,
further comments, I can go ahead and make a motion to add the words and evaluation after policy making to 1D.
So there's a motion to amend the motion. So is there a second?
Can I just clarify? Will and evaluation or evaluation of the superintendent treasurer remain? Are you asking that that's struck and then
No, that would
I
stay.
just wanted to be clear.
Stay.
Okay, thank you.
I don't think the high revised code lets us get rid of that.
I think, Bob, and tell me if I'm right, Nettie, the amendment would be policy making and evaluation, correct?
Correct.
The evaluation of policies. I think we do that.
motion.
Yeah.
There a second?
It's fine.
Yeah, there's a motion on the table, an amendment, and we're looking for a second. Okay, there being none, we'll go back to the original motion to adopt the board norms as presented. Is there a motion?
Is that a motion?
All right, where you have it. Mr. Guidsfeld, would you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Drees,
Aye.
Mr. Sauter, Mrs. McKenna,
Aye.
Dr. Santiani,
Aye.
and Mrs. Trent.
Aye, motion carried. Thank you. Now we are at the public participation portion of our meeting. Mr. Guidsfeld, do we have any public participation?
We do. We have two individuals tonight.
Okay, and I will read my little ditty here. We now have reached the public participation portion of the meeting. The board recognizes the value of public comment on educational issues and the importance of allowing the school community to express themselves on school matters of community interest. I would like to thank each of you who have signed up for participation today and ask that you start by stating your first name. You can feel free to share any other information you believe would be relevant, such as a group affiliation or whether or not you have children in the district. We want to hear from as many people as possible, but we have two, so we're fine on that. Please direct your comments to the board as a whole. If you have questions, please know that this is not a time to question individual board members or district employees, but we will make sure to follow up with you. Lastly, I want to remind everyone that student privacy laws prevent the district from disclosing information related to any student, and so you cannot discuss individual students during public participation. Mr. Geisel, who's our first speaker, please?
I'm also going to, just because we don't have the timer working on the stand, I will go ahead and give a minute notice once we get to 2 minutes. So our first
Thank you.
speaker will be Dennis C. You got it?
Good evening. My name is Dennis Carney. My wife and I live at 3101 Bimbridge, just north of the high school. Regarding the DEI contract, what is the end game? It should be improving academic performance. This contract won't do that. And I'd like to ask the board, how do we know that we have a problem? I don't see it. I haven't heard anybody else that says they see it. It appears this is just money in search of a problem. I still contend that we've lost focus, and this contract affirms that. If this really is about the whole student, why not require a class in civics, government, and most importantly, our Constitution? Students will learn a great deal more about American values that will make them good citizens and improve the probability of their success when they graduate. Forgive me for not staying for the entire meeting. My wife already thinks I spend too much time with you folks. So thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Carney. And who do we have next?
Our next individual is Jim C.
Thank you so much. Always a privilege. My name is Jim. So as we enter a new era with the addition of Dr. Hunt and Dr. Stiddens, I want to highlight some points I've made in prior board meetings. Of more than 600 school districts in Ohio, Upper Arlington is one of only 12 to receive 5 stars in all 5 rating categories on the latest state report card: achievement, progress, gap closing, graduation, and early literacy. Of nearly 1,400 high schools, we rank 19th in advanced placement participation and 1st in international baccalaureate participation. When combining the two, we are number 1 in the state. We are 9th in the state for college enrollment within 2 years of graduation and are by any definition one of the best school systems in the state. I've spent the last 16 years immersed in cognition literature and know a lot about current best practices in education. I lack the K through 12 expertise of our teachers and administrators, so I talk to them and ask questions. And the more I learn about what we're doing, the clearer it is to me why we perform at this high level. Twice in recent months, I spoke about best practices in reading development. And since then, I've had the privilege of speaking with Dr. Pomeroy several times and learned that every recommendation I made is either being practiced now or is in the pipeline. This includes a writing curriculum that is widely recognized as one of the best K through 12 programs ever developed. Our schools perform at the highest level because we have incredible teachers and administrators, and we can continue to improve because our leaders are never satisfied. So the teaching and learning portion of these meetings is confined within strict boundaries. So Dr. Pomeroy and his colleagues are not able to expand on what they do.
1 minute.
So it is my hope to work beyond these brief speaking opportunities, to do everything I can to help inform the community on why our schools perform at such a high level. And I look forward to those conversations. I am convinced that Upper Arlington hit the lottery by adding Dr. Hunt and Dr. Siddons to our family. So welcome to you both. Let's do great things together. Let's build on our academic excellence and foster a warm, safe learning environment that embraces our growing diversity and makes all students feel loved. Thanks.
Thank you, Jim.
And that's the end of public participation tonight.
Great. Thank you, Andy. So you're up with our fiscal update.
All right, good evening. We are going to, with this session tonight, we're going to go back and actually go back 2 months. So to see where we finished the year. And then we'll talk briefly about where we are this first month of July. So 2 items to really look at. This first slide in front of you shows you where we ended the year compared to the 5-year forecast. And what I want to point to you first is really the blue box. So we finished the year about $1 million better than projected. How did that, or where did that occur? You can see about $400,000 of that was with revenue. And when you take that $400,000, meaning we ended up about 0.37% better than forecast. On the expenditure side, $633,000, that is 0.59% better than forecasted. So obviously comes to about $1 million. And that $1 million allows our unreserved fund balance to grow about 1.8% more than projected. So overall, I mean, as we was talking about it back in May, very strong year, a very strong 5-year forecast. It really came into where we thought it would be at the end of the year, very small amounts. The revenue side, you'll see really what caused the variation. You can see state revenues a tad bit higher. That relates to preschool and our numbers of preschool and how we get funded for those. But once again, last year, remember, money came in and then money went out to the ESC for preschool. All other revenue, the 2 areas that really are impacted by that $275,000. You had $140,000 with interest that of more than we projected. And then the other part of that is facility rental was about $130,000 more this year than projected. This really was the first full year with the new high school that we rented out the PAC, or the Performance Arts Center, and saw some of that revenue. And we'll have additional discussions in the future of really how that rental plays out to really our performances and the maintenance of our buildings. So just more of a heads up there. The revenue wise came in right where we expected, and expenditure wise very similar. You can see about $236,000 of salaries being less than forecasted. That related to really the classified supplementals. So therefore our supplementals were less than we expected at the end of the year, but with some additional work. Purchase services, utilities was about $67,000 better than expected. which is great as we continue to see utility prices increasing. And then the key is the $208,000 of other expenses. What is that? The majority of that is advances and transfers. As you know, at the end of the year, we typically do some advances of funds that are in the negative. So we have the general fund loan money to those grants, and then we go ahead and reimburse ourselves. I can say that the only advance that we made at the end of the year was about $2,000, much different than the last several years. And that's all timing and when we get reimbursed. So it's not that we planned it any differently, it's just the timing of it. So therefore, what we had budgeted for advance, we did not have to use. So therefore, you won't see that in July being returned to us then. Questions on where we ended the year? We feel good about it. Came within the forecast. You can see expenditures and revenue less than 1% difference from what we expected. So once again, we feel good with that and we'll continue to do that process. On the as of July, 1 month into the fiscal year, I'm not going to spend any time on this, to be honest with you, because 1 month doesn't really tell much to us, but I will just tell you, we are tracking about $34,000 better than we expected right now. But typically the July and August timeframe doesn't really do a lot to us because we aren't in full go yet. We also have timing differences of a bill was paid more in July or August, or depending on when some of our key bills could get invoiced to us. So we'll start having some additional discussion on the fluctuations really in September on that side. Questions on where we ended the year or the first month of the year? On the agenda tonight, you'll see once again that every August we have this, but we do annual transfers. So the transfers, just as a reminder to you, is we have 2 transfers that we started doing annually now. That would be $1 million we transfer from the general fund to basically the benefits fund. The benefits really is what we have to pay the retired individuals when it comes to sick leave balances or those types of things. We transfer $1 million in. Don't forget, the whole idea is to let that balance grow so that as we have larger retirements, as in more individuals in some years, not in other years, ideally it's more consistent on the general fund of a 5-year forecast. Also with that annual transfer, the board approved last year to start transferring $750,000 from the PI fund to the PI reserve fund, with the intention is as some of our new buildings start having challenges at the same time, 7-10 years from now, when it comes to whether it's HVAC systems or replacing turf fields, those types of things, that we've prepared our books to be able to cover a portion of that versus having to all of a sudden take that from the general fund right away or the same year. So once again, much more planning purposes, and you will see this every July going forward to make sure that we follow that practice. Three change orders I want to bring to your attention. They're small, but we always say we'll bring the change orders to you just for your information. The construction projects are pretty much done, right? So we made our final payment to Gilbane on the Wickliffe, Windermere, and Barrington. So the only other item we have still is Russilli for the high school. We're doing, well, that'll probably be in still another couple of months as we finalize 1 or 2 items. But these summer projects we had a couple of change orders. For the Moats Group, which is one who did our stadium turf field. As Greg mentioned, we had about a $6,600 change because of the lines we had to put in the field. We made some changes there to make the field more accessible to all the sports and also fall in line with some of the requests of officials and coaches going forward. The Tremont windows, we had some additional windows that we weren't anticipating to replace that we went and replaced as long as they were out there. And then Decker Construction is doing what Mr. Thompson shared at Hastings regarding the basketball courts. Part of that was a sidewalk or 2 needs to be replaced based on some of their challenges, but also some of our challenges. So we have a change order of $20,000 where we're covering half the cost, they're covering half the cost to go ahead and get that usable and also better than it was previously. So those are the 3 change orders, all rather small, but wanted to bring those to your attention.
So Andy, is that our cost of that is 10?
Our cost,
Correct, or is our cost is 20?
Their cost is 20.
Their cost is 20 for those 2 sidewalks?
Yeah, it's a larger issue because of how they're done many years ago and having to replace some underneath areas, et cetera. That's about a $40,000 cost.
Okay.
So it's a good question. And then finally, talk about legislation. Since I've talked to you last, the biennium budget was finalized, was approved by the governor. The key area for us is the Fair School Funding Plan, which we get a portion of our money. Once again, the important parts there is the values going into this fair school funding plan now will be based on cost of fiscal year 22 versus fiscal year 18. So more, so better estimates using fiscal year 22 for future costs. Phase in, once again, remember this is being phased in. It's at 50% phase in. So when you take the school plan or the fair school funding plan, it comes to a number. Previously, they'd give us 50% of that number. Going forward, they're going to give us another, 15%, another 15%, et cetera. So by the time we're done here at this at this year, we'll be at 63. I think it's, I'm losing my track now. We talked about it, 63%. And then I think it's closer to 70%. But we still have a ways to go. Okay. So that number didn't change. Don't hold me to it. I just forget where we ended up on there, but it is the phase in they originally talked about. The key for us though, is this minimum state share that was added in, which means that before the wealthiest districts, there was a floor of basically a 5%. That got bumped up to 10%. So now the question is, what does this mean for us? And this was a slide provided to us by Allison Russo, our representative. But it shows to you the top left corner for me is last year we got $3.5 million when it comes to the fair school plan, the fair school funding plan and additional aid. What we expect based on projections is about $5.6 million this coming year. That's about a $2 million increase. I think that's important because first of all, typically we would see a couple $100,000 at most a year increase. With these changes, it has allowed an increase. That's a 57% increase from what we got the previous years. I think there's still additional conversation to be had of, it's still not going to move the needle a lot for us. But I think the important part is we are seeing some additional school funding. And then as our enrollment continues to grow, that number will increase also. We also it's projected that we'll be receiving another $800,000 additional the following year. So you can see $2.9 million then after that. Where it comes to what we've talked about before though, is how much are we getting per pupil, right? And you can see this last year, we got about $563 per pupil. As a reminder, the auxiliary schools or the parochial schools, right? They get about $1,375 per pupil. So we always said that at least give us what they're getting. You can see we're starting to make some progress, right? We aren't there yet, but you look at next year and then the year after is projected will be at least over $1,000 per pupil. And I think that's important because when we've had that in the budget in the past with our various legislation groups, especially the alliance that we work with, right? That always got vetoed out by the governor. This time there was a change that was kept to help schools like us at least get closer to where the non-public and the auxiliary schools are going. So still work to be done, but it's nice to see an additional amount per pupil going forward that we'll be able to have some conversation on. Nancy? We're going to see an increase, but not the amount, and not as much as, at least what I saw, it was not the increase that we got.
I just wanted to say thanks for working with Rep. Russo on this. I know she worked really hard to make sure that the schools were getting a fair funding. So it's one of the wonderful things of getting involved in advocacy. There are some perks to it. Thanks.
No, and she represented us well too, the conversations we had, et cetera. So, there's always so much that the House can do, and it goes to the Senate, and then it goes to the governor, right? So one of three groups, but we feel pretty good that our voice was heard in some ways, not others, but once again, I mean, in some ways, though, our voices were heard. Any other questions?
Okay, thank you, Andy.
Great, thank you.
So now we will move to the consent agenda, and the superintendent recommends the following items, 7A through 10E, but we did earlier pull out 9E and 10D to vote on separately. Is that correct? Okay. May I have a motion, please?
I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as stated.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Mr. Geisfeld, would you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Drees,
Aye.
Mr. Sauter, Mrs. McKenna,
Aye.
Dr. Santiani.
Aye.
And Mrs. Trent.
Aye, motion carried. Thank you.
So now I would suggest that Item 11 is athletics. So if we do that one first.
Okay.
I make a
So- Yep,
motion.
go ahead.
I
Sorry.
make a motion to approve item 11 on the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Mr. Geisfeld, would you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Dries,
Aye.
Mrs. McKenna,
Aye.
Dr. Santiani.
Aye.
Mrs. McKenna.
I
Becca?
already voted.
Mr. Sauter. And Mrs. Trent.
Aye, motion carried. Thank you. Now we'll go to,
Go to the policies, policies next.
90.
9E.
That would have been 90. We'll now call that item 13, but we'll make sure we get that
so
correct.
we're going to look at 9E. And then I would seek a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion to approve item 9E.
I'll second.
Is there any discussion?
Yeah, so this is, I think, where Lou, you were mentioning earlier about our move from policy being a board level committee to an HR committee. This is where I was hoping to have a conversation about that, because my understanding is these policy changes came to us after going through the HR committee. That
No, that's not correct.
The-
Oh, I
the-
apologize.
These items here are truly just technical items, right? So they're, the policy that the board approved earlier, several months ago was if it's just a change in name or a change in title or address, those types of things, we would just go ahead and bring, it'd be a one-time reading, et cetera, where it wouldn't go through a formal process like the whole HR committee and those types of things.
And,
Right.
many of these align with the changes that were presented in the organizational chart.
Right. And so I think that's the technical corrections piece is fine because we did approve a couple months ago the need to not do a second read for technical corrections to policy. But this is where I wanted to have that conversation about moving policy from a board committee to a superintendent subcommittee. As you mentioned, Lou, we discussed it in June. I don't believe we've had a vote on it. And given that our committees are assigned at our organizational meeting, I thought that was part of the process is if we're changing the committees, if we're eliminating a committee that we agreed to at our organizational meeting, that we would need to vote on it.
I guess my question is, what committee are you referring to on what was eliminated, I guess?
The policy committee.
So there really wasn't the policy committee was a special board meeting. So
So I
really,
have-
it truly wasn't a committee. It was basically a discussion with all of you during a special board meeting.
So I have in front of me here our assignments on committees, which was distributed to us and updated on January 13th, 2023. And there is a policy committee in which all 5 of us are listed.
That was never voted upon as a committee, though. That was just I guess you could say as part of you got a part of when we listed the committees, but that was not a part of the committee on the approved by the board or in the minutes.
At the
Right,
organizational
so
meeting.
it was just a special meeting where we discussed policy.
Now, what Nate's saying, and I'm pretty positive, we'll pull it up, but I'm pretty positive that was informational, and we only approved the ones where the certain board members were being representatives of the board. I don't think that was one unless you think differently.
Got it. So you're saying our membership on committees, if that changes or if we eliminate a board level committee, we don't need to have a vote on that.
Because that really truly, that did not meet as a board level committee.
But
That
if all
met-
5 board members are on it, doesn't that make it a board level committee?
No, it's just a board meeting. Right? I mean, that's just the board works. Anytime the 5 board members are together, it's really not it's not really a committee at all. It's really just it's a board meeting. So I think what was said, I think that was done to help the board when they decided, when there was a intention of meeting quarterly, to have a special board meeting, to review policy. That's kind of how we laid it out, but that was never approved. It's just a regular board meeting type of thing. So I'm pretty confident that was not approved as you as a board. It just said you guys wanted to go ahead and take that we would bring policies to you versus the HR committee, but there was no formal approval, process for that.
I believe our vote is on the technical corrections
Mhm.
in the
About policies.
policies. And it doesn't include the policy meetings. And so I guess our vote would be regarding the technical, correct?
Correct.
Right, so
Yeah,
the discussion that we're having is about that. And so that's what I was asking was the process by which we came up with these changes for us. And so as we discuss process, as Lou mentioned, there's been a desire to change that, and I don't believe that change has been officially made.
So Andy, I don't know if you can clarify this because I don't know if we have access to exactly what we voted on, and I don't know if anyone can.
An organizational board meeting.
Right, no, but I guess my question is was that an informational, like, here are all the things we're going to do? And we're
That-
not
that sheet-
eliminating a policy committee because we didn't ever create one.
That sheet you had was a summary by the superintendent's office, just listing various groups, and that, not that it had actually been formalized. When I look at the organizational meeting, that was not part of anything that was approved. That was more just, I mean, the way they laid it out was more informational. This here, the only things that were approved were the who was representing the board in various committees, and that was not one of them that was listed.
In nine, which is what we're discussing, 9E, is there anything in there that talks about what we're talking about? No. So why are we talking about it?
Lou, it's related because it's about the
no,
process. That's
9E,
exactly what it's
no,
about.
That's
Lou.
a stretch. 9E is about policies. About
And we're
policies,
discussing
and we're
policies
approving
and
these
how-
policies. That's what we should be talking about.
Right,
It's
about
not whether or
approving
not we
policies.
move policy from a whole group meeting to back to HR like it used to be. That is a totally separate subject. That is not what 9E is, and we shouldn't be having a discussion on it because 9E doesn't encompass that at all. It doesn't
So-
encompass it.
This might help. There's, in the organizational board meeting, there's special assignments of board members. And there's a Upper Arlington Community Improvement Corporation, there's Ohio School Boards Association Legislative Liaison, there's the OSBA Student Achievement Liaison, there's a PTO President's Council Liaison, there's the Upper Arlington Education Foundation Board of Trustees, and the Stand Coalition. Those are the only ones that are called out in our organizational board meeting. So all the other committees are superintendent committees that were created to facilitate business. So they're two separate items.
They're not in 9E. We shouldn't have a discussion on it. This isn't part of 9E.
I just wanted to point that out for people in the team.
So I understand that we disagree about whether this is related. So perhaps this is something we can consider for a future agenda item.
We've already approved it.
No, we haven't.
No.
No, that's not something that typically has been.
So should I call the vote on the technical piece? Okay, Mr. Gladstone, would you call the roll, please?
Mrs. McKenna,
Aye.
Mr. Sauter,
Aye.
Dr. Santiani.
Aye.
Mrs. Dries
Aye.
and Mrs. Trent.
Aye, motion carried. Thank you. Now we will go to 10D, which is transportation routes. I guess I need a motion to approve the
Sorry.
transportation routes. No, that's okay.
I make a motion to approve the transportation routes 10D.
I second.
Is there any discussion?
Yeah, I had just a couple of questions about that. So I know we're talking about decreasing the number of routes we have because of the number of drivers, the shortage of drivers. Can you talk a little bit about how much longer the routes will get or how many routes we are needing to eliminate?
So I know we've gone from, and Greg, jump in here to help me. I know we've changed the parameter from 0.1 to 0.2 miles. And we've also had conversation, I believe this was communicated back in the spring, to families about transporting students that transfer into another middle school. So those are the two changes in terms of numbers of routes. I don't have that information.
Right. So my understanding is this stuff occurred towards the end of last school year. But my understanding was that we were increasing the walk distance from 1/10 of a mile to 2/10 of a mile for students. to decrease the number of stops to make the routes more efficient. So the fewer stops you have, the quicker you can make it through the route. We had multiple buildings, again, my understanding, multiple buildings last year where buses were arriving right at bell time or very close to bell time. And students were consistently dropped off late and were not making it to class on time. So that was a move to alleviate that problem.
And the change from 1/10 of a mile to 2/10 of a mile from the house to the bus stop, is that for both elementary and middle school?
It is,
Yes.
Okay.
yes.
And we think that's the shortest we can make it because of the number of drivers that we have.
Well, Dr. Santi, I mean, this is just the first step, right? I mean, this is to get us started. I mean, there's conversation and part of it was us to notify the community that there would be some changes. We may, as a board, be having some additional conversations as we have some additional challenges when it comes to transportation. And let me remind everybody, this is not a UA issue. This is a across the board issue of trying to find transportation, right? So everyone's starting to have these conversations. When you think about the changes we made, we are still far below what the state mandates. And our goal is to go ahead and continue those. I mean, to give it the best service we can. But we also are trying to be realistic and to make sure that we meet our requirements by the state of making sure that our drop off and that our timings of drop off and our timings that our kids are on the bus meet those requirements, but still giving the best service we can. So as of right now, there are very minimal changes. I can't say we can't say that's going to continue, knowing some of the challenges we have, but as we go through those, we'll make sure we have those conversations. But as of right now, the transportation department did a great job of trying to minimally impact how we've done it in the past to where we are today.
And I don't disagree with that. I just thought it was really important that this wasn't hidden in a consent agenda, that we're approving a change from 0.1 to 0.2 for elementary students. I thought it was important that we were open and discussing it openly. So thank you.
And I think it is important to reiterate, and I think I've shared this with the board. We're currently struggling with staff with our current situation. So as Andy mentioned, we may have to make more difficult decisions as we move forward. So we'll continue to monitor that as we go through the next couple of weeks. And there's an ebb and flow with the start of school. Parents saying, "I'll use transportation," making decisions not. So please know this will modify and change over the next month or so.
What are the state requirements of walking and bus length?
2 miles.
2
miles.
2 miles. So you look at where we're walking, we're talking, what, 0.2 basically. You don't have to, I mean, so back when we were having, back in the day when we had some levy issues, to be honest with you, there was conversation on if we went to 2 mile walking, which is the state maximum, how that would really impact us, and that would really eliminate almost all the routes with 4 or 5. So we provide a service. We hopefully never have to get there, to be honest with you, because we do understand the value of it, and we'll continue to do as little as we can to make sure that we provide a service.
And I'm sorry, just as a clarifying, that's the state maximum from distance from home to school or distance from home to bus stop?
Home to school.
Home to school. And we use
0.2 is the change.
No, we use 1 1/4 for that number.
We use 1 1/4 for
1
that one.
1/4.
We
Is
use
there-
point- We use 0.2 to the bus stop.
from the bus stop. Is there a state requirement from home to bus stop?
Not that I'm aware of.
This decision was made strictly because of personnel, correct? We don't have personnel.
Or my understanding is personnel and arrival times, getting students and dropping off. I believe there's a change in law on how early you could drop students at a building a year ago, which has also contributed to this issue.
Because these are like kind of in the weed questions, but also our bus drivers take kids to elementary and to middle school, or do we have separate buses doing both of those routes, or are there some doing both routes in the morning?
They ride separate buses. So middle school's tier 1, and then those same drivers and buses go out and pick up the elementary kids.
So the bus drivers are doing 2
Correct.
routes in the morning, which
Correct.
is sometimes why those elementary kids are being dropped off late, because they can't be at school earlier So they've made that arrival time later.
Correct. And the distance we're talking about is 160 meters. Right?
Have need a calculator.
Which is a lot for a kindergartner.
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, yeah, and this isn't, it wasn't like a cost saving measure. We weren't trying to
No.
do this. It's strictly because of our current situation,
Correct.
which is nationwide.
Correct.
I still think you talk about services and how we pride ourselves in services, right? I guarantee you, you take those numbers against most districts across central Ohio. I mean, our numbers are, our walk is still very minimal compared to most.
I did want to say thank you. I know there's been a lot of work on this and it's not a happy decision that anybody wants to make. I just thought it was really important we weren't hiding that decision from our community.
So we have a motion and a second on the floor. Mr. Guidesfeld, would you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Treese,
Aye.
Mr. Sauter, Mrs. McKenna,
Aye.
Dr. Santiani,
Aye.
Mrs. Trent.
Aye, motion carried. Thank you. Now we are at number 12, memorandum of understanding for creating a collaborative partnership. So I would seek a motion to accept this MOU.
I make a motion to accept the 12A of the consent agenda.
I second.
Is there any discussion?
Yeah, I do have some comments. We all got an email from our community about this memorandum of understanding. And so I spent some time looking into it. It seems this is something that we have just kind of rubber stamped and approved annually for the last 10 years. And over those last 10 years, there has been some updates to the way that communities implement diversion programs. And so the language of this MOU, there are areas that are vague in it that can be clarified now because they are administered in different ways. There's some outdated language in this MOU as well. And there's also some inconsistencies within the MOU itself. I think just because it hasn't been changed in 10 years. The previous MOU that we approved last year does not have an expiration date on it. So there is no urgency in approving this again this year. And so what I would like for us to consider doing is actually updating this, since again, we've just been kind of rubber stamping it for the last 10 years to bring it up to 2023 standards and in terms of what we understand for diversion programs. So I would like for us as a board to consider tabling this so that we can have some thoughtful conversation with the city on how to update this MOU to, again, make it less vague, make it less outdated, and to make it less inconsistent.
Dr. Hunt, do you want to speak to this? Or my understanding is that this is a contract that the city has developed.
Yeah, so it has been in place since 2013, to be clear, in the diversion program. It's for first offenders with criminal charges. The memorandum is more, it actually is about utilization of space, us allowing for space in our high school. I think a lot of the terminology changes, those would be owned by and decisions made by the city. Those would not be decisions made by our school board. I have had conversations about effectiveness and how the program operates in the school. All of that has been very positive. And really, this is a convenience factor for those students that are involved in the program, that they don't have to drive over here during the school day or during business hours to meet the requirements of their diversion program. So I believe the decision on language, names, things of that nature is something the city would have to address in on their time frame. To your point, I know there was conversation. Can it continue without? There aren't termination dates. The city, I think comment was, if we're okay, they're okay for now. So I think that describes it. I have not evaluated whether there's insurance issues with that, or if we need to make agreement, that's something we would probably want to check. I think my most pressing issue is this is what I've been told, this is effective, and we want to start the school year having this ability to allow this to continue within our schools.
And the communication we received from the city did say that we can continue this without approving it at this time, today. Was that that was my understanding.
That's
when we
my
spoke with the city
interpretation.
attorney.
I did not talk to them about that
Have
specific.
have we talked to legal counsel regarding holding this out as far as what our liability would be, as far as not having a new contract or continuing
I did,
contract?
I did
or-
not have that conversation.
I don't see there as a liability, because once again, there's no financial impact here. It truly is just a space. And I think, but I guess my thought would be that this is not something that we would want to drag on for, say, 6 months. This is something that we would want to deal with, but I think I can't see our liability coverage or our insurance broker having any issue with this, the insurance company having any issue with this for the near future.
And just to clarify, this isn't a contract. It's just an MOU for them to use an office in our building for 2 hours a week. It's not really a contract that we're entering with the city.
But just to be clear, students would have to leave the school and come here for this support, starting this school year.
Not according to what I read into the email that was forwarded to me. But I also don't know, or I certainly don't want to commit the city to. They're going to do what they do in terms of what the positions are called, what their job descriptions articulate. Just want to be clear, that's not ours to do. That's not our work, and those are not our decisions.
I'm comfortable with the way this is worded. I think our administrators and our staff here have a lot of things to do getting ready for the school year and educating our children. I'd like to vote on approving this. We could make that move.
So Andy, I have a point of order. We have a motion and a second on the table. If you want to amend the motion, if someone wants to do that, we can. Is that correct? So Dr. Satiani, if you want to move to table, then you can move to table and we can seek a second.
Yep,
Sorry, I have another, so we're saying if we were not to approve this, the memorandum of understanding we have from last year would still apply.
If my understanding, if you vote no on this, the city is going to require the students, because they don't have this memorandum, to come to the city to complete this program. So part of this is that potentially disrupts those involved, their educational day. They're going to have to drive over here to do this.
So what I will say is I am understanding that the wording is not our work to do. And I think when you have students who are in a vulnerable situation like this, protecting their educational time and not utilizing that by traveling back and forth, or like further kind of drawing attention to that they might be in a difficult spot, I think is really important. But I think on top of that, also what's really important is the language we use to talk about it. And so I'm interested to not have this program be disrupted, but also if there's a way that, are we able to talk to the city? Because I do think the email we received had a lot of positive language about like restorative justice, which I think our district already utilizes and believes in. And I think the language you use around that to ensure that kids aren't further stigmatized is really important.
I believe Dr. Santiago is correct, and I don't know for how long, though. We didn't have that conversation. I think they're willing to continue with the approval that this board made last year in August with the same language for a period of time. I don't want to commit to how long that is. That's a conversation I would have to have with them. And they would have to then make decisions on what they want to do with whatever feedback we provide.
Yeah, so just to reiterate, voting no on this would make the students leave the building, but voting to table this would not make them
Correct.
leave the building. They would still be able to receive services within the building if we vote to table this.
And
So-
again, I don't know for how long. That's
Right.
something we would have to work through.
So I'll make a motion to table the MOU for creating collaborative partnership with the city.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there any further discussion? Mr. Guides, would you call the roll, please?
Dr. Santiani?
Aye.
Mrs. McKenna?
Aye.
Mr. Sauter?
Nay.
Mrs. Drees? Mrs. Trent?
Aye, motion carried. We are on to number 13, future agenda items. I'm not sure what I'm doing with this. There's no motion, right?
No, it's just, I apologize. I logged out over here. So it's just, looking at, the September board meeting, just to give the Board of Education an idea of what we anticipate coming forward. I want to be clear, other business will come along the way in the next month that will add to this agenda, but we anticipate giving the Board of Education an update on 2023-24 actual enrollment, looking at projections and giving an update on where our enrollment stands and staffing aligned with that enrollment. We do have to clean up and provide the bullying and harassment report. It's actually from last year, so we're going to get in a cadence of doing this in January and June going forward, but this report will be for last year. And then we will have Dr. Siddons, Dr. Pomeroy here to give an update from the Teaching and Learning Department specific to what areas of focus are for this year to update the Board of Education on that as well. So those are the items we anticipate right now.
Dr. Hunt, could we add the memorandum of understanding for correcting or for creating the collaborative partnership to that future so that we can get the language amended and approved by next month's board meeting?
I'd like to have a conversation just with the city on kind of what they
Okay,
see.
but at
in
least
terms of
we'd have a
timelines.
discussion on that.
Yeah, I'll provide you an update for sure.
Okay, thank you.
And is there a feeling that the way we're doing policies or want to do policies, there needs to be a vote on that? Or I just don't want to every meeting continue to have a discussion if there's board consensus on how we want the policies to be done. Because it sounds like we're not all on the same page about what we've agreed to or haven't agreed to about policies. And I would have to go back and look at my notes, so I really understand, but my understanding is that we were doing policies as a special meeting, not as a committee. So I would understand. Then for that, I would think we don't need a further vote, but if that's a clarifying point and would make our operating a little more smooth to understand that it's going to live in the HR department or we're going to continue to do special meetings, that would be helpful, I think.
And my understanding was that was moving back to HR, and I do not believe a vote is necessary on that.
Okay.
If the board would like an update on what that's going to look like, we can provide that in our update next month.
Maybe that can just be included in one of the email updates that you send us. If it's just an update on how we're doing it, if we don't need to vote on it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
maybe
can,
just in the weekly update. would
I
be
can
great.
do that.
Thanks.
Okay, so now we're going to do a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Make a motion to adjourn.
I second.
Mr. Guidestone, would you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Drees? Mr. Sauter? Dr. Santiani?
Aye.
Mrs. McKenna?
Bye.
And Mrs. Trent?
I'm